Hello, Playdate. Welcome to a very special episode of the Helloplaydatepodcast. This is not Don, nor is it Nick, but it is Ryan, and we are so glad that you've joined us here for our very first interview episode. So for our very first interview, I reached out to Christa Mrgan of Panic, who does their videos and podcasts. And you've probably heard me mention before how enamored I am with the podcast that's being produced for the Playdate by Panic. Essentially, Christa is putting together these very well-produced episodes. The first one talked about the history of the Playdate and how it came to be through this 10-year iterative process. But subsequent episodes have been talking to the development teams of the Season 1 Playdate games. And as a fellow podcaster, I was just really impressed with what Christa was putting together. So I reached out to her and asked her if she'd be willing to chat with us here at the Hello Playdate podcast. And that's exactly what you're going to hear today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Christa Mrgan. Christa, welcome to the Hello Playdate podcast. It's really great to have you here after listening to your tremendous podcast, the official Playdate podcast for Panic that you produce. Can you just give our audience a little introduction to you and your role at Panic?
Hi, sure. Ryan, it's so great to be here. Thanks. So my name is Christa Mrgan, and I make videos and now podcast at Panic, the makers of Playdate.
And how long have you been with them now?
I've been with Panic officially since February 2018. I started on contract in the fall of 2017, and then they brought me on full-time in 2018.
Maybe you could give us a brief summary of your pre-Panic occupational trajectory and how that brought you to Panic in 2017, 2018, it sounds like.
Sure. I've actually wanted to work for Panic since my husband, Nevin, began working here in like 2008. I was like, this company is amazing. So I, back at that time, I worked at an animation studio here in Portland, Oregon. And I used this FTP client called Transmit to upload really large video files for our clients. And I was like, wow, like these people, like they just have like this really nice attention to detail for this, like just, Mac app that I use for transferring files. And then my husband began working there, and I met Cable and Steven and some other folks who worked at Panic, and it just seemed like such a great company. I was like, oh, this is so cool. But I was like, there's no role for me at that company at all because they have a designer who is my husband. And then, I was making videos at the time, but then the iPhone came out and well, it had been out, but I sort of like got the idea like, oh, I could design for the iPhone. And so I kind of left video and I worked for a Mac software company designing Mac apps. I'm actually using an application that I designed a version of by Rogue Amoeba called Audio Hijack. So I worked for Rogue Amoeba for like 6 years. And then I left and co-founded an internet startup company. We made some commenting software for news organizations. It's like an untrollable commenting platform. But it didn't pan out after like 2.5 years. That folded. And then I was like, oh, I need a new gig. And what do I want to do? And I was like, I'm done designing software for a while. I just want to go back to making videos because I have a great time doing that. And so I thought I would just pitch different companies with my explainer and marketing tutorial video chops. And I was like, well, obviously I have to pitch Panic. So I figured then I would just work on contracts with different tech companies in Portland. But what ended up happening is I made some videos for Panic. And then eventually they're like, well, why don't you just join our team full time? And so I did. And a little while after that, I was like, it would be so great to have a Panic podcast. And they let me do that.
That's so cool.
I know. It's still wild to me that they let me make a podcast. And so I made 6 episodes of the Panic podcast, which I call season 1. There will hopefully be a season 2 someday. But people really seem to enjoy it. And I was like, well, why don't I make a podcast for Playdate? And everyone loved that idea. But when I decided to do that, there were only 12 games in season 1. So I was like, I'll do an episode for every game. And now there are 24 games and I'm still doing an episode for every game. So now I mostly make podcasts. That was a very long-winded, meandering storyline of how I got to my job at Panic. But
that's great. It sounds like you've got some animation and software development skills in your skill set. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, so I minored in graphic design and majored in film production. And hubris just led me to say I can design software. And so I did. And and it went pretty well for me, honestly. But then when I worked at the company that I co-founded, I designed all the software, and that also involved HTML and CSS. Unfortunately, when I was designing for Mac apps, it was more visual design and less code, zero coding, and only a little bit of coding with the internet company. But I don't like it. Turns out, I don't want to do that anymore. I don't ever want to write HTML and CSS as a full-time job ever again.
Amen. I can hear that. I've had experience myself enough to know that I don't want to do it at all.
Right. No,
so I get the feeling from the official Playdate podcast, which you host and produce, that you've not only had considerable experience with the Playdate, but that you genuinely enjoy it. Like, I get the sense that this is more than like just a job or a run-of-the-mill paid marketing position for you. And to that end, I was hoping maybe you could talk to us about when you were first introduced to the Playdate. Like, what stage of that 10-year iterative cycle was it in at that point? And how has your relationship with the Playdate evolved since then?
So I've been super excited about it from the start. And definitely the podcast grew out of just like, I'm excited about this thing. I'm excited about all these amazing people who are making games for it. I'm not a developer, but I love to hear about the process. I love to talk with people about their process of making and developing video games. And the first time I saw Playdate, I saw a very, very early version of it. So remember, my husband has worked there since like 2008. So I knew about it from the very beginning. When it was just like, hey, Cable wants to make this thing as like a celebratory like device to give to people for like our 15th anniversary of the company. And I was like, oh, that's amazing. And he's like, you remember those, like little handheld games? And I was like, oh yeah, I totally had some of those, and that was super fun. I was like, oh man, he would make those. And then he was like, yeah, but then it could like switch games. And the initial version was much more similar to those, where it was like static graphics, and you're like, maybe like I think the earliest game that I played, or like prototype of a game that I played on like a simulator, was like moving a little transmit truck like back and forth to avoid obstacles that were coming at you on a road type of deal. And like, I think you had to like pick up packages and things. So it was sort of like, transmit the file transfer game like as a trucking game. As a Game and Watch game. But on this, like then when I saw the screen, I was like, oh, this is what it actually looks like. And I think from there, they're like, this has to be more complicated than just those Game and Watch style games. So what are we going to do with this thing? So I saw a very early physical version that was basically like the screen and some buttons on like a board.
What year would you say?
Kind of like housing.
What year would you say that was? I'm guessing prior to you joining the team.
Okay. Oh yeah, it was way prior to me joining the team. This is just like Nevin was showing me something that he made. I want to say it was like 2014, maybe 2015. 20, I don't know. Yeah, it was a while ago. I think our son had just been born, so it was probably 2014.
Okay, that's a good approximation.
my timeline is fuzzy. And then there was a very far along prototype of a game and of the device at a holiday party one year, and this was still prior to me working at Panic, and I think that was like probably the 2016 like holiday party that they had. And they I believe it was Greg and Nevin who had made this game where it was like you were like Santa on a sleigh and like controlling Santa going up and down and like, avoiding obstacles and like dropping presents off and stuff like that.
Was that
Um,
functioning via the crank at that point?
yes, yeah, you were
Huh.
controlling the sleigh's up and down movement with the crank. And then
Neat.
I believe like dropping off presents with like the A and B buttons, and it was a physical like prototype then with a case.
Hmm.
But not as polished or refined as current Playdate is.
Hmm.
But yeah, so that was pretty cool, and it's wild to think about because I remember then it was like, yeah, this is so close to being like production ready, and boy, did we not know how many I don't know obstacles there would be to encounter on the way. So yeah, hardware is hard. It's a big challenge, and it turned out there were a lot of different things that came up between getting something to like 90% of the way there to 100%. I just felt like that timeline slowed way down. That last 10% just really took a long time to get everything right, and the pandemic didn't help. But
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I became familiar with you through the official Playdate podcast that you produce, and you've, like you said, started documenting conversations with the designers of season one game releases, and even put together a deep dive history of Playdate's decade-long multi-iterative process from its initial concept of starting out as a simple clock to more ambitious, dedicated handheld device, like you mentioned, sort of akin to those Nintendo Game and Watch games, to the multi-game platform it eventually became and is today. And I've told you this privately, but as a fellow podcaster, I feel like I can see the mountains of time and scripting and editing and really just a labor of love that goes into each one of these episodes. And I was wondering if you can sort of pull back the curtain on your creative process for assembling these podcast episodes. Like, what does that look like for you on a bi-weekly basis?
oh, sure. So well, it started with the idea, like the podcast, it began when I was like, oh, I should like just interview you all. Like people had just come back from Malaysia in like 2018. I was like, I should get some interviews of like your like what's going on just for like, documentation purposes. And I think this was the thing that led me to create the Panic podcast in the first place. I was just like, I'll just get some audio and maybe I'll make a little like video montage at some point with this as like voiceover. But anyway, jumping forward in time to my current iterative process, what I do like to do for the developer interviews is I like to play the game first, obviously, and really get a feel for it. And then, just come up with questions. And it's, I often ask the same questions, like, can you tell me about yourself? Tell me, the name of the game. Tell me how you had the idea. Give me a description of the game. How did you hear about Playdate? That kind of thing. But then there are always like game specific questions that arise from having played the game. I often want like tips and tricks, just for myself, like how can I get better at this.
I have some questions about that at the end for you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And then, I don't want to spoil anything. So, I try not to get like too specific about like, if it's a puzzle game, like specific puzzles, like how do you solve that or whatever.
Yeah.
But, just go in depth on just like questions I have that I think other people might find interesting. And then I like to just ask about, well, what was your process like? What was challenging? What was fun? Would you make more Playdate games, that kind of thing? And so then I end up with all of this tape because I love podcasts, but I really am an NPR nerd and I prefer narrative scripted podcasts that start from interviews, but then, basically are like audio collage. Like I like to make a story, and I try to have, kind of an arc to things, really sort of, I don't know, make it streamlined and make it make sense. So then I just like to kick back and like listen to the tape a few times and just sort of feel like, what are sort of like things to pull out? Like, how do I want to start framing this? And then I typically just pull out like the quotes that I know I want to use and kind of trim them up, remove most of the ums and ahs and all of the normal things we do when we're speaking like that make things, that's how we speak in real life. But then if you're creating a story, you want to trim a lot of those things out and try to create as many full sentences as possible that don't have filler words in them. And then I just start like moving the pieces around kind of. And then I write out my, script in between, what people are saying. So you don't hear my actual question. Sometimes I will re-record myself asking the question just later so that it's like it sounds the same as the rest of my narration. But typically I'm just audio collaging these interviews together. Yeah, and then I add, music and sound effects as needed, and it's just a lot of fun.
It sounds like a lot of fun and a ton of time. How much time would you say goes into a more traditional season one game developer interview type of episode? Like not counting that first, this is how the Playdate came to be, 90-minute monster that you put together,
Oh yeah,
but like
that one was
the developer interviews.
Developer interviews, gosh, I would say they're probably like 20 hours of work, actual work time. But so much I don't know, it's hard to say because so much of it is just like I'm going to take a walk and like think about it, or like I'm going to take a walk and listen to the tape again. So it's like, is that part of the work? I mean, it is, but it's a creative process. So I don't know. It could be 20 hours. It could be 15. It just kind of depends too on how solid a grasp of a plan I have, I guess, like from the beginning. And because some episodes I definitely know how I want to form them, and others I'm like, oh, what am I going to do with this tape? And I don't know. It depends.
That's as a creative person, I feel like that's rare to find in an employer that will say, yes, take the time to craft this thing that requires thought. Like it's not just go, busy work, make a thing, hurry up, now where's the next one? But it sounds like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have the space to really construct and think about these things. At least that's what it appears in the final product, because it's really good. I really love listening to what you put together. But yeah, is that somewhat accurate, or what would you say to that?
Definitely. And that is so kind. Thank you so much for all the kind words. But yeah, I mean, I would just say Panic is amazing. They're just so so different from, I feel, most companies, especially software companies, where there tends to be this culture of it's always crunch time and we're always trying to make it to the next, iteration. And like, we got this release date on the horizon and you gotta, push your changes to get ASAP and get, sorry, I'm using like my bro voice, but Panic is the opposite of that. And I love their sort of philosophy is, what if this wasn't really just a software company? What if it's just a bunch of really smart, creative, capable people in a room and they make cool stuff, and whatever they need to do, they do it. And I think you can really see that in sort of our evolution from, making tools for software developers to publishing games to creating a handheld gaming device that gives you a season of games from interesting developers and also really, really encourages you to make your own games. Either on our web-based platform that's more entry level and approachable for all, or the full SDK that's also fairly approachable in terms of like game development resources. But yeah, I just feel like Panic's ethos is, make the best possible version of a thing that you can. You do have to balance that with time. Like obviously, if I was taking, 3 months for each episode, that would be a little too long, but 2 weeks in between each one is fair, I feel. And I've also been working on it for a long time. I've done a lot. I did a lot of the interviews actually like last year. And so I have interviews for everyone. And like, at the time that I did the interview, I would start pulling out quotes and stuff, but the episodes aren't really finished in a finished state until like a couple weeks before they come out.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, is how far ahead of schedule have you completed episodes? Like, are you several ahead, one ahead, zero ahead? Like, where are you at in terms of release schedule?
I'm one ahead at this point. And so
Okay.
like, I'm just, trying to stay that way. If I'm always like one step ahead of my deadline, that's great. So I do have like a slight cushion of time, which I always need because I don't know, time gets away from me. I'm kind of time blind, I like to say. So, but some things when it's a creative process, some things may just come together really quickly and other things take more time than you think. So, so it's great to have, extra space in which to work.
So that kind of dovetails into my next question, which is it seems like you've settled into this like every other week release schedule. Is that going to persist for the duration of the season one games? And if so, is there any commitment from Panic to allow you to continue producing episodes beyond that?
Yes. So, yes. So my plan, as long as I, don't fall behind or, something catastrophic doesn't happen, my plan is to just keep delivering these episodes every 2 weeks. And it won't just be interviews with developers. I have a couple other, sort of like special episodes in the hopper. So, and those will come more towards the end of the season. Although I might mix it up and like put one in the middle. I don't know. Anyway, for now, I have a few other sort of like bonus episodes planned for the end of the season. And yeah, I just feel like Panic is so generous with their time. They're just like, I don't want to. It's not like just do whatever the heck you want to do, but at the same time, they're just so supportive of like, oh yes, this is a cool thing. You're doing well. Keep doing it, which I love. But then they're also, I have to make space for the videos. So I create the Playdate update videos, if you've seen those.
Mm-hmm.
And that's super fun. So that process takes a while too, because I write a script and then I hand it over to Cable. He edits the script, passes it back to me. I do the, production planning, and then I film those and edit them and animate them. And it takes a while. Although this last one didn't take as long because it was only like 5 minutes. But I want to do more of those like quick little Playdate updates, like here's what's going on. So we talked a bit about catalog in this last Playdate update. So I'm excited to talk more about that in a future Playdate update when we have more to say about it. So,
Is
I have to balance that with the podcast.
Is that the feature where we're going to be able to make in Playdate game purchases?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the sort of like curated store, basically.
Are you able to say anything more about that at this point?
I can't. And it's not even that I'm not allowed. It's just that we gave the information that we had basically in the Playdate update. And there isn't, because we're still developing it and we're still working it out and figuring out how it's going to work for us and for developers and how the app is going to work. So, I mean, it's a process, and when I have more to tell, I will.
Okay. Sounds
in
great.
Video form. Yeah.
So there are a lot of incredible season one games that have been released on the Playdate so far. And at this point, I only have about half of the 24 season one games. But one of my personal favorites is a week one release, and that's Whitewater Wipeout. And in your episode with Chuhai Labs, the designer mentioned that actually, I think you mentioned that Chuhai Labs is already hard at work on the follow-up snowboarding game, and that you might even favor it over Whitewater Wipeout. So please, can you tell me anything about that next release? Like, how does the gameplay differ from Whitewater Wipeout? And like, what elements are you finding more compelling?
Well, so I'm a snowboarder, and so that just appeals to me from the outset. And so you're snowboarding, you have obstacles, but you're also like racing down this mountain, and you're doing like sweet tricks, which I cannot do in real life. I can like sometimes I can jump and even land, but mostly I just go down the mountain. But the graphics are really awesome, like they are in Whitewater Wipeout.
Yeah.
I feel like I don't know, something about the crank mechanic with the snowboard is even better than the surfboard, because
Hmm.
the surfboard, like you're going up and down like this, but the snowboard, you're like, slaloming back and forth, like you're carving back and forth, and then you're, cranking to do tricks. And the only thing that's hard is like to do the really cool things. You have to like crank and then quickly like hit A and B buttons at the same time, which
Hmm.
for me can be a challenge. But yeah, it has a lot of like overlap, I would say, gameplay wise with Whitewater Wipeout, but I just found it even more fun than that. So I don't know. I just played like an early version of it that was like here guys, like try a demo. Which I was like, oh yes, I will do that.
Yeah, yeah. A couple things I wanted to touch on there. First, you said that the graphics are maybe even better than Whitewater Wipeout, which impresses me because I was quite impressed with Whitewater Wipeout. There's a number of things on there that I mentioned on our very first podcast, like the way that the wave curls over and makes it look like there's some depth and kind of casts a shadow to like the cascading water of the wave itself. And I was very interested to hear the designers and artists talk about how they used 3D models initially, but then converted those to 2D pixel art, because I kept looking at that game before I heard that episode, wondering how in the world they did this, because it looked like you were seeing this surfer from multiple angles, but it's a bunch of pixels. So what's going on there?
Mhm.
So that was really enlightening for me to hear, and exciting for me to hear that the snowboarding game might even surpass that in terms of graphics. So you've got me excited.
Yeah, the character too of the snowboarder itself is even more like detailed, and just
Mm,
like the all of the sprites that make up the snowboarder, I just feel like you see it in like every single angle. And
hmm.
I mean, you do in the surfing game as well, but yeah, it is kind of amazing. It's like, how did they do that in 1-bit pixel art? But it makes sense that it was that they started with 3D software.
So
Yeah, that artist is really cool.
I'm guessing they're using a similar technique for the snowboarding game. If you say you're able to see multiple angles of your player, is that right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Yeah, I think the artist, I think, did a similar, like he has a process now
Hmm.
that he does, where it starts in 3D and then he translates it to 1-bit pixel art, which is still like, no small feat. Because yeah, I mean, just like making the gradation for the wave, when you have, two colors, black and white, it's just, yeah, it's really impressive.
Yeah, agreed. Um, has Panic made any commitment to having it a part of season two, or are they going to toss it in this catalog and have it available for purchase?
I don't know. If I had to guess, I would say it would be a catalog release, because I think it will be ready before season 2. But don't hold me to that. I'm not speaking officially. I'm just guessing um, from my own from what I've seen. Because I mean, when I played it, it seemed pretty far along. And awesome. And it was, ooh, this is like, you could play this soon. So yeah, I don't know what the plan is though. There, I would
Okay.
imagine it would be just available, or they can. I mean, this is the great thing about Panic too. It's so they're so open, and they want
Hmm.
it to be open, and so they're not like you have to sell through us. It's like
Hmm.
if Chuhai decides they want to sell it, they can just like sell it on their website or sell it on
Yeah.
itch or like
Yep.
whatever, because you can always sideload a game anywhere, and I just love that.
Totally.
I
It's
mean, not to
incredible.
toot our own horn, but I just think it's great.
It
Because
is.
so many
Yeah.
other platforms is like it's all about locking in, and you have to go through us, and
Yep.
it's, I don't know, I think it's cool.
Agreed. Yeah. um, so you mentioned that the snowboarding game might be ready before season two. Does that mean you guys have an estimation onto when season two will be ready for release or available?
No, I have no
No.
idea.
Okay.
And I think nobody knows. I mean, time, what is time? I don't know. We just it's just so hard to plan. I mean, I know that we're calling we're doing like an open pitch call though,
I woke up
I
to
saw
that
that
this
like when
morning.
yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, I
Yeah,
saw
so
that
it's
on
exciting.
the Playdate Discord.
Hmm.
So that's very exciting. And another reason why Panic seems like such an incredible place is they're prioritizing underrepresented developers and trying to help newcomers get a published game under their belt. And I just think that's so amazing. I know that happened with uh, Sweet Baby Inc. and
Hmm.
Lose Your Marbles, Lost Your
Hmm.
Marbles.
Lost your marbles. Uh-huh.
Yes, yes. I thought that was a really amazing thing for Panic to do. They weren't just going out to, the big boys and the regulars, but it looked like Sweet Baby Inc. or sounded like from what I heard on your podcast, that they very specifically pair experienced designers with up and coming designers and sort of help them through game development. Is that a reason why you sought them out, or Panic sought them out initially, or?
Yeah, I mean, they Panic specifically wants everyone to be able to make video games, and there's just such this gatekeeping thing in the games industry, and it's very sort of self-perpetuating in
Mhm.
terms of like social reproduction of sort of like people who are similar choose other people who are like them to
Mhm.
work on projects together, and it ends up excluding like a ton of people. And it's sort of like this chicken and egg thing. It's like you can get a job on a game if you've already created a game like successfully, but like you
Yeah.
can't, so it's like you have to start somewhere. And so Panic really loved that Sweet Baby were creating these opportunities and sort of finding underrepresented people who are incredibly talented and sort of like helping them get their credit out there on their first game to sort of like be able to go on to other things too. So we are all excited about that because we want more diversity in the games industry, and working on that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's almost like, there was this uh ethos established, like you said, you got to work on a game to be on a game. And how can you get that? It's almost like, hurt people like, and that was continuing for a long time until Panic released the Playdate, essentially. And it's so cool to see that Panic is willing to step out of that mold and give up rights to the game itself. The developers keep the rights, from my understanding, as well as rights to create collateral for that game. I think I saw that Panic can create collateral for a game, but then that collateral is theirs. But any collateral the developer wants to make is the developers. Is that essentially how it's working?
That sounds right. I actually don't know all of
Okay.
the like ins and outs of like contract details and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, Panic is just like it's your game, like do what you want to do. Like Chuhai just released an awesome tank top for Whitewater Wipeout. I don't know if you saw this. I was like,
Oh.
this is the best merch ever. I ordered one. Actually, Nevin ordered one too. I can't wait till they arrive. It was like a pre-order, so I don't know when they're going to arrive, but we're gonna wear our like rad 80s tank tops and jorts and like post a picture on the internet probably. So please look forward to that.
I
But
cannot
yeah,
tell
so it's
you
sort of like
I cannot tell you how much I want one of those, except for the fact that I'm a middle-aged dad and I don't think I can pull off a tank top anymore. So
no,
please,
you could do
please
it. Just
make a t-shirt. I beg of you.
no, but I love that. Yeah, and it's like Panic doesn't get a piece of that, and why would we? It's not our thing, but I don't know.
Yeah. And
It's
the
cool.
the art and design on that t-shirt, or
Oh
tank
my
top
God.
rather, is incredible.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
It is so good. Yeah.
Agreed. Cool. Well, is there anything else that you want to let listeners know about, that you want to find more ears for. Really, I just want to direct people toward your podcast because I feel like it's being done so incredibly well. It's just laser focused and honed to all get out, but feels incredibly natural. And you feel like a very genuine, approachable, knowledgeable person putting this all together. And I mentioned that for the interstitial audio that you put in there into the interviews. It all flows so well. And I look forward to each new episode. So anyway, all that to say, great job. And do you have anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners?
Thanks so much. You're so kind. No, I mean, just if you would like to, please listen to the podcast. Sorry, that's the hard sell.
There'll be a link in the show notes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, the Playdate podcast. I'm having a lot of fun with it, and I hope that people enjoy it. I think, I don't know. I think people enjoy hearing the development stories, and so I'm happy to make those. So you've been working on a game. I just saw this I just came from a workout and I saw your email right before we jumped on the call. But this looks cool. So you've been making something in pulp?
Yes. Yeah. I've been having a lot of fun with that. I'm a comic artist and I love gaming, and I've done gaming podcasts before. So this is all, kind of coming together. But I have a large aversion to coding. And so I hopped onto pulp not thinking much of anything, but I'm like, oh, okay, I can make something in 8x8 pixels. That's interesting. Okay, I can puzzle these together. That is also interesting. Oh, there's some really brief actions that can happen. That's interesting too. And so it just kept leading me down the rabbit hole. And now I'm talking with one of the other co-hosts of this podcast. His name is Nick Baldridge, who is far more familiar with coding than I am. And so I have a feeling I'll be asking him some questions about how to make things do things in that game. But I've been having a ton of fun making art for that and coming up with a concept and a storyline for it. So we'll see if anything comes of it. I just want to make something tiny and fun. I don't know if you've caught wind of a game called Tochi.
I don't know if I've seen that one yet.
It's sort of a dungeon crawler, Legend of Zelda, but on a much smaller scale. And I don't know for sure, but I think it was made in pulp. It looks very pulpy, and and it requires maybe 5 to 10 minutes of time, and then you complete that game. And cool. That was like a nice parental way of experiencing a game that you don't have to sink a bunch of time into, because as a parent I just don't have that much time anymore, but I'd love to make something like that, and we'll see where it goes. But thank you for those kind words.
Well, it's so exciting to see just how many games there are out there, and just the fact that I can't even keep track of them all anymore is incredible. Right. Yes. Because, for a long time, it was I knew all of the games that were available and I played them all. And now that, pulp is open to everyone and the SDK is available to everyone, it's suddenly I'm just randomly seing, screenshots of games I had never seen before go by on Twitter. And I'm like, oh, what's that? I haven't seen that. So that's really neat to see. I love it.
Totally.
Cool. Well, send me your game eventually when it's available, and
I'd love to. Yeah. Very cool. Well, that's probably a fine place to wrap up. So Christa, thank you so much for giving us your time today. I super appreciate it, and hope we can direct a few more ears your way.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you again for having me. This is super nice. And thank you again for all the kind words.
Christa, thanks again for joining us on this very special first interview episode of the Hello Playdate podcast. It was really a pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to many more of your podcasts. Keep up the great work. And just for posterity's sake, this interview was recorded on June 3rd, 2022, and first aired on June 7th, 2022. If you would like to get in touch with us at the Hello Playdate Podcast, you can do so via email at helloplaydatepodcast@gmail.com, on Twitter at HelloPDPodcast, Instagram we are Hello Playdate, website is playdatepodcast.com. We also have a Discord. If you're interested in that, just contact us on one of the aforementioned places, or you can even give us a call on the Bingo's tip line, which is 724-BINGOS1. That's 724-246-4671. Yes, that really is a phone number you can call and leave us a message if you like. All right, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you in just a couple days for another regularly planned episode. Doobie doop 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 doobie doop doop. Behind the scenes tips and tricks. All right. Are you okay to chat tips for whitewater wipeout?
Oh, sure.
That is my jam.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I have a spare couple minutes, waiting for my son at school or whatever, that's the game I'm playing.
Nice.
And I am sort of maxing out at like around 500,000 or so.
Oh, wow.
I don't know where you're at or what sort of tips and tricks you've got.
Actually, I should go get my Playdate. It's downstairs, but no, you have far exceeded my point score, so I don't know that I would have any viable tips for you. Okay. It's like crank as many times as you can, try to land straight, try to hit the A and B buttons while you're in the air to get like cool bonus points. But yeah, it sounds like you have far surpassed me, so I don't know that I could offer you anything.
So I'm not sure I knew about A and B buttons in the air to get more points. So
you can because you can do go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was going to say I knew about the pointing up on the D-pad to get more air, and then in order to spin faster, left or right. But I don't think I ever saw any tips down below to press A and B or what that might be used for.
Yeah. Let me go. No. Yeah, I don't know if that's an official thing, but that was a tip that Giles gave me. Huh. And I noticed I did get a few extra points when I did that because you do a little thing in the air. I'm like, oh, I look cool. Okay. But yeah, that was one of the tips that I got. But even so, it sounds like you have far exceeded me.
I was feeling okay about myself. I think I was in the top 30-ish or so when I first got my Playdate because my co-host and I were a few lucky so-and-sos who got in on group one of the Playdate. But then I think as more people have received their Playdate and are getting better at games, now I'm still in the top 100, but it's slipping.
Nice.
So I'm trying to figure out how to get those 1,000,000 point scores that I'm seeing from people. And I just, I don't know. So I was hoping you might have some Jedi knowledge for me.
I don't. I think the secret probably to getting the 1,000,000 point scores is to be able to sustain that flow state for a super long time. And for me, it's sort of I can get into it and then I don't know, I just get knocked out of it somehow. I'll get distracted and then I don't know, it messes up. But people that can really zen out, I think, into it and just, I don't know, keep that same high level of reaction and attention is, I don't know, we should ask them, but I'm not even I don't think I'm even in the top 100. So it's one
of the things I've noticed about the wave or each round is that there's a finite amount of wave, it goes down eventually and you can't surf anymore. And so I think, but I don't know for sure that, I'm trying to go up and down and then launch to get real high so I can land a quad. But I'm starting to wonder if like I'm spending too much time riding the wave and riding it out and it's getting lower as I'm doing that. And maybe I need more triples or something, or it sounds like there's that A and B function that might be helpful. Yeah. So I'm not sure. Probably need to poke around at it some more.
I was doing that a lot too, is like sort of like, oh, I'm going to get up speed by going up and down on the wave. But I think you don't need to do it that much. I think you just need to do like a couple up, down, and then just jump right up. But yeah, because I think, and especially like when I was first playing, I was doing that a lot, and then like just not doing tricks often enough, I think, and then like the wave curl would catch me. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, again, it's like I don't know. I shouldn't be the one giving you tips, I feel like.
Well, if you encounter any of those 1,000,000-point surfers, let me know. I'd love to talk with them.
Yeah, who are they? Let's find them and
0, 1, 2, 3, 6, 5. There's very few names up there, it seems. Well, Christa, thank you again for humoring me with these whitewater wipeout tips, and I'll let you know when this interview is live. But thanks again for being on here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. That's so
you
nice.
got it. Keep up the great work with the podcast. You too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.